The Gotham City Sirens have returned in 2024 with a 4-issue miniseries, and we've been covering it on this channel. It's issue 2 time. So that means we're halfway. I was fascinated by this not just because I read the original Gotham City Sirens run, but because this has Punchline in it, and we follow all things Punchline on this channel when we can. Because I like to. I'm Sash, this is Casually Comics, and let's take a look at issue 2. See what carried forward from 1, if any of the points that were a bit weaker solidified up, if the parts that were solid remained so, if anything changed. It's gonna be interesting, and since we're so close to launch, spoiler warning. First, a quick recap. Hot tub streamer Punchline. Yes, you heard those words right. Her and her shirtless cowboy henchman kidnapped White Rabbit, well, half of her, for reasons. Punchline is running some kind of online game that could be played out in the real world by people piloting other people as avatars. These seemingly fueled by her drink, Exo Punch. Poison Ivy was investigating the drink, the chemical compound inside, for reasons. It was not fully explained, she just was. Catwoman was about and managed to save Jaina, and Harley encountered the game out in the world. Issue 2 is the one with the main cover of Punchline using her henchmen as chairs. The knife is getting dangerously close to cutting her tongue in half like Morrison's Joker. This issue opens right away where the last one left off. Punchline getting out of the hot tub and putting on some behindless chaps for reasons. In this scene, we do learn why she had her henchman kidnap White Rabbit. It's because her subs either want to hunt her down or play as her. That part's not entirely clear, but they want her in the game in some way. But either way, whatever they want, she needs to be processed. So this issue has some answers coming as to what Punchline is doing, but there are still a lot of questions. At the halfway point, there's still time to get to some of them, but it depends how long they take to do it. Now, some of those questions are going to rise more if one has more lore knowledge, like how many people are aware that Jaina can split into White Rabbit? But those are the deeper lore questions. They're also just some general questions. Why is Punchline doing this? Is it for somebody else? Just for herself? Is it for the money? Is it for the research? Is it for the clout, as she once said in the Gotham game? It remains to be seen, but the ideas surrounding a dark version of being a top e-girl streamer that are running through this are interesting. We need to get her processed ASAP. We've got 2 days to get the whole place prepared before the elite tier subs get here. Squid Game vibes. They've paid for the perfect trigger warning game experience, so that's what they'll get. A couple of things. Trigger Warning is a great name for the game for a couple of reasons. 1, the more obvious shoot-'em-up first-person shooter vibes, but 2, a mocking tone on the idea of being triggered, because the game would be triggering or problematic to many. There's also this element of Punchline being very flippant to certain concerns. She does have a very sociopathic personality, and this naming is in line with that. It also plays upon mocking certain phrases that rose to mainstream prominence and usage through proliferation, and some would argue then dilution online. The terminology existed prior, but its life online altered its common usage. Again, it's very in line with Punchline. You may also have noticed that the artist has changed. This 4-issue mini is being released weekly, and so potentially, depending upon how much time or warning people had, there may not have been enough to get the same artist throughout. So there is a difference in the art. Now the artist is Daniel Hilliard, whose style is not radically different, but it's noticeable, particularly in how the faces are drawn. So for some, that's going to be jarring. The colorist remained the same, so that element still remains. That's helping with some of the consistency, at least. Now the reason for White Rabbit being kidnapped is twofold. 1, as mentioned, is for use in the game, but 2 is because in this story, Jaina has the ability to sense where her other half part, the other person, is. How Jaina's powers have worked has always been a bit vague. When she first debuted, this version of her, because there have been multiple White Rabbits, and Marvel also has one, but this version, the New 52 Jaina version, was more fetish bait than anything else upon inception.
Anything on the girl?
A half-naked girl in white lingerie. No doubt the World Wide Web is replete with such images, Master Bruce. I shall do my utmost to sort through them all.
I don't like that smile, Bruce. I don't like it. Because she's able to see her, Jaina is then able to explain some of the ins and outs of Punchline's facility.
The distillery is huge and manned by those purple-eyed zombies, but her henchmen, those cowboys, they call themselves the Nasty Boys, aren't being mind-controlled. The place is isolated and secure, heavily guarded. One central armored gate is the only way in or out of the compound.
If she's using the distillery to make Exo Punch, then she's bound to be trucking it out of there. I destroyed Punchline's last manufacturing setup here in Gotham. That's why she had to relocate her operations. And when I took control of the docks, she lost her shipping lanes. So now she has to transport everything into Gotham by land. This is relevant information. This issue does provide more context for why some of the things are happening, and it feels a bit more connected to the overall Batman universe and lore as a result. We're getting more context. Context that some could argue should have been at least a little bit included in the first issue, not maybe all of the details, but maybe some of the personal ones. A line from Catwoman in issue 1, something like, "She won't get away with this again," or "I can't let her do this again," or "I stopped her once before and I'll do it again." Something that would have laid the groundwork but also expand upon the mystery on a bit of a personal level, create a bit of some personal connection and stakes, like, oh, this is personal. I wonder what happened, for those who weren't aware. Or for those who were aware, seeing that, oh, they're building up that rivalry that started from the beginning of Punchline when she shot Catwoman in the head. For those who've been following along with their Punchline, like me. This little sequence here, just maybe in the bottom right corner, could have used an editor's note back to those issues of Catwoman and Punchline Gotham Game by Tini Howard, but definitely Catwoman. But in all fairness, there is enough context provided in the issue on its own. That would have just been some icing, so people could then, in theory, seek out other issues if they were interested. This issue still doesn't go the extra mile to add a why to the Sirens wanting to stop Punchline. It leaves the reader to fill in the gap of because it's wrong on their own. But the opportunity to flesh out what stopping Punchline means for each character is not here. And it feels like a bit of a missed opportunity because each woman does have a unique relationship with her, or this is their chance to form one. Pamela doesn't really have one as of yet, but it would be easy to force something with the environmentalism or Punchline's drink or the way it's distributed doing something to the environment. Harley and Punchline have their Joker connection, and Punchline thinking Harley is pathetic, and Harley still being a bit convinced that Punchline is like her, misled and manipulated, not fully knowing the extent of Alexis's history or her personality. Catwoman has a whole bunch of history with Punchline that is at least touched upon here, which is nice to see. Instead of building that out, some of the space in issue 2 is taken up repeating points from issue 1. Last issue, Catwoman said she was going to examine the Bison and its inner workings. This issue, she says, and leaves to do the exact same thing. It takes up panel space with repetitive action that could have been used to otherwise build out the plot. Okay, this gives us a few hours to do some research. I'll analyze tissue samples from the seppuku cowboy remains. That's a pretty callous thing to say about people who didn't actually kill themselves, if you think about it, because they were being controlled by others, so in a way they were murdered, but it does fall in line with the whole callous regard that Pam has for human life. I'll go look into the tech on that Bison, again. I'll just be here, I guess, kicking rocks or whatever. Oh, they're moving White Rabbit to a new location. Our next section provides much more elaboration on Punchline's drink, the XO, and the workings of her operation. It's very interesting. It also features something wonderful, an editor's note. Granted, it has a small issue of not giving the whole title of where it's from and just saying Punchline 1 to 5, so if Punchline ever does get another series, that could prove confusing. It could have taken some space of the, oh, hee, I'm just a silly girl humor and used it for accuracy, because they could have narrowed down the issues as well, but it's there, and it's true. What they talk about in this scene is referenced in that series. You know, nanotech is so passé these days. After an imperfect beta test, I've now found that by binding an organic compound of pheromone modulator to the nanotech, I get much more stable results. Thanks to the discovery of a new secret ingredient, I've discovered that exposure to XO Punch habitually over time creates a much more sustainable long-term effect that I've been looking for. Yes, my The Stuff reference was accurate. Do, the right stuff. This issue once more is a very solid one for Punchline in terms of bringing all the aspects of her together. The callous sociopath, the seeker of attention and clout, and also the one highly tied to online culture. I'm sure you're dying to know why me? Why did Punchline kidnap me? And the answer is quite simple. Pictures of you tested well among elite subs. And I figured, hey, why not use White Rabbit? Keep the subs happy. And if you have a bad reaction to the XO Punch compound, then you've got a backup out there in the form of Jaina. The idea that subs would pay to either play as or watch White Rabbit run around entirely tracks. Plus, there's also a bit of a playing with the follow the White Rabbit motif going on here. And you're playing into the Alice in Wonderland down the rabbit hole themes. On the other hand, you have the drug reference, which is also present in that book. But this comic is playing it both ways as well. If you reach, there may also be a Matrix reference, but that's probably reaching. Both of which are relevant to what is going on. It's clever, which is also why the self-deprecating tone of the editor's note feels off. There's plenty of smart choices here, no need to downplay them. The rest of the issues is dedicated to the Sirens planning how to get into this compound and then carrying out that plan. The bodega worker from issue 1 turns out to not just be a throwaway joke, but more of a remix on the idea that Harley hangs out at convenience stores, from Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, or Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of Harley Quinn. I also guess that news footage was old because his store is fixed already and the windows were shown to be smashed. That takes a while to fix. Maybe he has multiple stores. Or maybe he is meant to be someone else, despite the very, very similar character design. It's probably the same person. It's most likely a small continuity or error. There's a lot of time dedicated to this that potentially could have been dedicated elsewhere, but this issue really wants you to get to know Perry, the bodega guy. And for those who find this sequence funny, they will probably appreciate it. Shoo, no juice for you.
You want bread?
Yes, please.
$3. What? No soup for you.
This is Perry. He talks about himself in third person, and to help, he wanted a kiss from Pam. And some money, but the kiss way more.
Thank you. Leave it to Perry. Cancelled. Exo Punch delivery is cancelled.
Whore. You sound jealous, lover. I have to toss this out to you. Did anybody else have a visceral reaction at the way that Harley employed that word? Is this the kind of casual colloquialism? It's meant to be a reclamation type thing, and it's meant to be a friendly term of endearment, taking it back for the sisters. It feels a bit off for Harley, in my opinion, and just off in terms of the relationship she has with Pam, even if one is playing with a Harley Quinn animated series type vibe. But maybe that's just a me thing, because in general, I'm not a fan of the term being used that way. So there's definitely a personal bias on my part, which is why I'm asking you, how did you feel? It haunts me. But what about you? Post bodega, the rest of the issue is them hijacking a shipment truck and heading to the compound. Jaina has at that point lost the ability to be able to really see or feel White Rabbit because she's been injected, so she's hanging around for use later in the plot purposes. Punchline is in less of her OP mode. When she debuted, she was very much capable of doing everything. They've dialed that back over the years of her appearances. However, the Sirens are not on their A game in terms of thinking things through in these issues. As a result, they hop into the back of this truck with no thought to the idea that Punchline may have eyes on it, even in the form of a regular camera, let alone the kind of avatar thing she has going on. So it's a trap, and they're quite easily captured when they get there. It's a trap. Why didn't we think about it? And then they're all locked up together, and part 2. Probably gonna get to see some more of a game, because the disguises that Harley found were cowboy themed, because the game is cowboy themed for reasons. Just some questions that immediately arise from this, such as why put them all in the same cell? That seems to increase their chances of escaping, unless that's part of the game. They're already in the game. Also, why not inject them all with this mind control compound and get people to play them? I'm sure the elite subs would love that. Harley Quinn? Poison Ivy? People would pay for that. Since the concept has been introduced, it begged the question, for me at least. It's one they could also have avoided if the issue had ended after they'd been gassed inside the truck, and then Punchline standing over them with some kind of witty last line, which I of course cannot think of at the moment. Like, let the games begin, and like, that's not witty at all. The game's afoot, that's Sherlock Holmes. While all comics have a degree of suspend your disbelief, this comic is asking for a decent amount of suspension in certain places. Miles will vary on how much suspending one is willing to do. This issue, as mentioned, marks the halfway point in the series, and a lot of key information has been revealed, or seems to have been, which is good as there's not much time. It would be difficult to introduce a lot of new concepts in, say, the 3rd or the 4th issue. Though there do also seem to be some reveals left, which could leave 3 and 4 with some heavy lifting. This issue has more going on in the first one, and displayed more of the characters in relation to each other and interacting. It's still relying a lot on the readers to fill in some gaps, and some of the characters read as if they have a bit of the same voice. Some of Jaina's lines feel like they could be said by Catwoman or Harley and vice versa. You want to hand over that gun, Jaina? No, this is my emotional support cat. Fair enough. As of 2, Poison Ivy and Punchline feel the most in character. Harley varies, and it depends on which version one prefers. White Rabbit, in general, is just a bit of a blank slate. She has not been fully defined as of yet, even if she reappeared in that Joshua Williamson series. Punchline and her plan continue to be the strongest aspects of the series to date, time of recording, to the point where it feels like it should be retitled Punchline, the Gotham City Sirens, just because there's so much more going on with her section of the story. The idea of her game and her kidnapping these villains for people to hunt down, her gaining victims through a more socially acceptable addiction in her modified energy drink. There's just so many things to play with. There's a lot more substance there than with the Sirens. On top of not shoring up motivations, there also hasn't been much urgency established, and the stakes feel low for everyone. Even Jaina, who needs to go get her other half, it doesn't feel like the most pressing thing. And that's largely because there's not really a strong emotional connection between either the Sirens and Jaina or Jaina and the reader. Everything remains fairly light and breezy, which for some will be exactly what they're looking for, while others may want a bit more depth. Overall, it's still a fun issue. However, some of the jokes are a bit more derivative motive here, and they do stretch them a bit. And with so little time, one wonders if this issue made the best use of it. It's not about radically changing the story or wishing it were different. What's here is interesting, and it is what's written, and that should be respected. That does not mean it cannot be examined or analyzed. It's about making the most of what is there or noting if something is off, because there's value in that from an intellectual standpoint. And overall, there was room for more character moments, or a bit more connective world-building tissue, just in terms of inside the story itself, not even from the overall universe. And there was some pulling from the overall universe, which did make things feel more connected. It's entirely possible to enjoy something, but also know its flaws, and then critique or praise it, or both, and vice versa. I'm very intrigued to see ultimately where this ends up going. Loving seeing Punchline again, and it's fun to see the Sirens again as well. What do you think? Are you enjoying it so far? Is it not your cup of tea? Are you now loving Punchline? Do you hate her? Do you not care? Put all of your thoughts down below. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things like share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.